Well, it should be no surprise that Days of Our Lives is in last place for the month of March, and gonna go down as the worst soap opera of 2022 at the rate it's going. I don't see it coming out of that bottom spot anytime soon, at least not by their own way. Another soap opera is gonna have to be worse than Days for Days to drop out of this last spot, because the show is horrible. You know, even the last couple months, I've been able to find one story that was at least decent, but not for March. Every single story on this show in March sucked. I mean, where do we even start? What terrible story do we start with first? Let's start with Sarah. I mean, I've already talked about this when I did the worst storylines in Days of Our Lives history video, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, what to talk about with this story? It's the stupidest part of this story is the fact that she's in the story with all these older veterans on the show, and she thinks she's as old as them. And I've seen some of the writers, Jamie Giddens, and we'll get to Jamie maybe in this video. I don't know. I don't even know what his excuse really is, other than the fact that she's having a mental break. But once again, I need to reiterate, like I reiterated in the worst soap opera, the worst Days of Our Lives stories video, is that this is not like a chip in the brain like Stefano would do, which was crazy enough. But at least there was a reason for a memory, someone thinking there's someone else. No, this is just Sarah read it in a journal and thinks she's someone else. She thinks she's Renee DiMera, and she's calling Xander Alex Marshall, which, yay, a nod to history, a nod to a great character from the 80s. But I'm sorry, Xander can be good, but Xander isn't even half as entertaining as Alex Marshall was in the early 80s, or the 80s years that I've gotten to watch. So, yeah, I just don't like it. And I think it's stupid that she's younger than everybody and she thinks she is Renee DiMera. Just stupid storylines. And some of these storylines maybe wouldn't be as terrible if the entire show wasn't as terrible as it is right now. Because you can't find a good story on Days right now. The A, B, C, D stories all suck. Let's move on to The Possession. I've talked a lot of shit about this story, and I will continue to do so because it's off the wall. As I said in the Worst Days of Our Lives storylines video, this is the second worst storyline, in my opinion, in the history of Days of Our Lives. Because A, there's no point, but also the fact that it makes Passions look like great television. And, Passions was what it was. It was kind of making fun of soap operas in some ways. And they had these wacky, outlandish storylines that were pretty ridiculous. But like I said before, that even Tabitha on Passions did some darker shit than this devil. We're supposed to believe this is the devil in Salem. And yet, all Johnny wants to do is fuck. Which is great and all. But, why make Johnny the devil when you could just make Johnny a really horny character? Why does he have to be the devil? Who, when all the devil wants to do in Johnny is have sex with Gabby and other women. They could have wrote this story for Johnny without being possessed, and it probably would have been better and not came off as stupid as it's coming off. And then he goes into Baal to make everybody think that the devil wasn't Baal so they could exorcise Baal. And the devil story can continue for months and months and many more months, even though everybody hates it at this point. And the ratings have been dropping pretty bad. If they drop more than they have recently, it ain't going to be good for Days. Because, NBC will let Days get away with a lot with the ratings. Because Days still makes money. And Days did good on Peacock, which is good for Days. But if Days drops around 1,500,000 viewers, I don't think NBC's going to be too happy about that. So Ron better pull some good stories out of his ass, or it could actually come back on him. Ken Corday might actually wake up and see that his show is bad, and I don't think it's going to be recovering anytime soon. Honestly, I don't. let's get to the one story I thought could be good, and that was T.R. Coates and Lonnie and him being her father. They decided to go from 0 to 100 in a day on that fucking show. They fast forwarded this story crazy, where TR's into drugs and he kills a drug dealer and like fucking almost kills Eli, shoots Eli, hurts Eli, who had a scare at the hospital. And this is another thing I didn't like about this story, and when you tie it into the devil, is that T.R. Coates actually comes across like a real villain, like a scary villain. And then you put it next to what's supposed to be the devil, who's just getting into hijinks like a Scooby-Doo episode. And then you have the way this might look, and does look. I'm not going to get too much into it, but the fact that the black man, the black villain, is coming across scary in the same show that has the devil is terrible. Any way you cut it. Any way you fucking cut it, it's terrible. And so you have all these terrible A, B, and C storylines, and it's not like you could even get anything in a D story, because then you have boringness from Nicole, Rafe, and Ava. A triangle nobody gives one single little fuck about because it's boring as hell. So there's just no relief from bad writing on Days of Our Lives right now. I cannot state this enough. I think for me, at least, I'm not going to call it the only decent story on Days. It is, for me, the least worst story, because they're all terrible. But the least worst story right now for me is, I guess, fucking Leo. Because at least it's somewhat entertaining. I still hate the fact, and I've talked about it a lot, how they just ruined Craig and Nancy as characters for this shit show of a circus story. But at least they brought Will and Sonny back, and I hope they're going to be sticking around because Will left or something. But I think they're sticking around because they need to be on the show. They bring something to the show that the show needs. I think they fit into the show right now. I mean, I still think this story is another over-the-top story, but at least it has its entertaining moments, even though it has ruined characters, so it's still bad. It's still bad. There is no redeeming story on this show. And then the writers are going on and on about some award that they won. Somehow Days of Our Lives won the Writers Guild Award for the possession story, which I could kind of see. I don't know what episodes they put, but if they put episodes that were like when Doug was possessed or the very beginning of the possession story, then I could actually commend them. They kind of deserve that because some of those episodes were actually good and probably a lot different from the other three American soap operas. But the fact that Days of Our Lives writers won the Writers Guild Award tells me all I need to know about how every single award show is a joke. And shit, you might get slapped at one. At least that's entertaining. Big ups to Will Smith on that one. If award shows keep doing pro wrestling work like that, I might have to watch them. But I think they're pretty meaningless because most awards are bought and paid for. Which also brings me, though, to, I give a lot of shit to the journalists in soap operas because they kiss all this ass. And now I understand why they do that. Because they think if they can kiss ass as good as Jamie Giddens, they might get a job on a soap opera. Because that's how Jamie Giddens got his job. He kissed Ron's ass throughout his entire career. Now he's working under Ron, and they could both write terrible storylines together. Isn't that awesome? So yeah, I mean, all around, what can I say about Days of Our Lives? It is a terrible mess circus of a show. It is in last place for, I don't even know. It's the 4th or 5th month in a row for me. All 3 months of 2022 so far in my rankings, well on its way to being the worst soap opera of 2022. I mean, if some of you are entertained by this, I guess big ups to you. But I think it's all bad. It's just all a joke. The show's a joke. The writing's a joke. There's a lot of characters that are starting to be destroyed, like Craig and Nancy. And yeah, I think I just have to chalk it up to Rather than truly building stories, and giving characters motivations for what they're doing, Ron would rather have a plot device so that his characters can be possessed and do things off the wall instead of just writing and building stories. A sad state of affairs on Days of Our Lives.